Welcome to episode 30 of The Pulpiteer. I'm your host, Eric Hepburn, and I'm glad to have you join us for today's episode. Today's podcast is entitled The Fire Next Time. The title and much of the content is inspired by James Baldwin's 1962 letter to his nephew James on the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. If you'd like to hear the letter in its entirety, which I highly recommend, you can find it on YouTube by searching audio book Fire Next Time James Baldwin. It is the one read by Jesse Martin. So without further ado, let's jump into the live recording. I am struggling to switch between fire building and preaching this morning. For some reason I can't quite fathom. Good morning, I'm Eric. I'm your pulpiteer, and I'm honored to serve as such. My pronouns are he, him. We have an all ages service today. What does that mean, an all ages service? Like all good pools, this one has a shallow end and a deep end. Place to play lightheartedly, place to test your boundaries, a place to go as deep as you need to go. My invitation to you this morning, wherever you're at, is to challenge yourself a little bit. Challenge that comfort level a little bit deeper than the place where you already feel safe. And let's listen to a story from Dr. Seuss about some folks who are very, very serious about their tracks.
The Zacks by Dr. Seuss. One day, making tracks in the prairie of Prax, came a north-going Zacks and a south-going Zacks. And it happened that both of them came to a place where they bumped. There they stood, foot to foot, face to face. "Look here now," the north-going Zacks said. "I say, you are blocking my path. You are right in my way. I'm a north-going Zacks, and I always go north. Get out of my way now and let me go forth." "Who's in the way?" snapped the south-going Zacks. "I always go south, making south-going tracks. So you're in my way, and I ask you to move and let me go south in my south-going groove." Then the north-going Zacks puffed his chest up with pride. "I never," he said, "take a step to one side. And I'll prove to you that I won't change my ways if I have to keep standing here 59 days. "And I'll prove to you," yelled the south-going Zacks, "that I can stand here in the prairie of Prax for 59 years. For I live by a rule that I learned as a boy back in south-going school. Never budge, that's my rule. Never budge in the least. Not an inch to the west, not an inch to the east. I'll stay here not budging, I can and I will, if it makes you and me and the whole world stand still." Well, of course, the world didn't stand still. The world grew. In a couple of years, the new highway came through, and they built it right over those two stubborn Zacks and left them there standing, unbudged in their tracks.
Very serious about their tracks.
I invite you now into a place of deeper stillness and reflection with this reading from James Baldwin, one of America's greatest poets and prophets. This comes from his 1962 book, The Fire Next Time, and is an excerpt from a letter written to his nephew James in 1962. "Take no one's word for anything, including mine, but trust your experience. Know whence you came. If you know whence you came, there is really no limit to where you can go. The details and symbols of your life have been deliberately constructed to make you believe that what white people say about you. Please try to remember that what they believe, as well as what they do and cause you to endure, does not testify to your inferiority, but to their inhumanity and fear. Please try to be clear, dear James, through the storm which rages about your youthful head today, about the reality which lies behind the words acceptance and integration. There is no reason for you to try and become like white people, and there is no basis whatever for their impertinent assumption that they must accept you. The really terrible thing, old buddy, is that you must accept them. And I mean that very seriously. You must accept them and accept them with love. For these innocent people have no other hope. They are, in effect, still trapped in a history which they do not understand. And until they understand it, they cannot be released from it.
So I think we've delineated the shallow end of the pool from the deep end of the pool. On the one hand, we have the Zacks, carrying out the education of their early life with an inflexibility that derails the whole project. Not everything we learn is worth carrying all the way through our lives. On the other hand, we have us. I believe today is the 5th, and we are 15 days from inauguration. Still stuck in a history precisely because we fail to understand it. Still stuck in a history precisely because we fail to understand it. So, this is our first service of the new year. It is a UU tradition to do a fire bowl type service. I want to issue to you, I'm going to invite our membership stewards. They're going to bring around a basket that has slips of paper and some pens. And I'm going to invite you into a few moments of reflection. What have you learned in your life that is no longer serving you? Now, we might need a guidepost for that, so I'm stealing something. Well, I should say I'm borrowing something that's been borrowed a million times. I'm borrowing it from my wife. She used to have this hanging in her office at work. Now, this one you'll notice has all the social media icons on it. This, too, goes through an evolution. The idea is think. And originally it was think before you speak. So ask these 5 questions. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? Now, this is a litmus test that we could use for things we say out loud. This is a litmus test we can use when judging whether the thoughts in our own head are worthy of our attention. We've been practicing in recent months some different meditation techniques. How do we know which thoughts to let go without granting them extra attention, and which thoughts are worthy of inspiring how we show up in the world? This is as good a metric as I've found for doing that, even with your own thoughts. For one of the most disturbing things that we realize in our journey, but it's with us from childhood through elderhood, is that not every thought we think is true. Not every thought we think is true. And some of them are unhelpful, and some of them are unkind. And some of them are uninspiring, and some of them are unnecessary. So today's fire ceremony is an opportunity for you to cast a spell. Now, that's something we don't talk about magic much these days. But I want you to pay attention to a few things. The idea of spell isn't as foreign as it might seem. How many people here have had a really important thought that they stifled and left unvoiced? That ever happened to you? Yeah. Now, probably there's another situation in your life where you let those words out of your mouth and noticed that it changed everything, whether you kept it inside or whether you let it out. That is the power of a spell. When we give voice to things, it puts it out into the world in a different way for ourselves. How many people have learned something about themselves by speaking a truth that they believed but never thought before out loud? Amen. So, giving things voice matters. Writing matters. Writing is a way of bringing that thought into reality, instantiating it. It's not only a mystical idea, but it is also a mystical idea. So, I'm going to invite you to a few moments of reflection. I'm going to invite you to think of some things that you don't need to carry through the 4 years that are coming. You're going to have some new burdens come up. I feel confident in saying that. So, what is it that you're carrying now from your past? A teaching, a learning, a preconception, an idea? What is it that you don't want to carry forward into the next year? I'm going to invite you to write that down. We're going to open the back door. My son Simon is tending the fire pit outside. After you've had a moment to reflect and you've written down, when you're ready, you'll stand up and you'll walk out that door and you'll place your slip of paper in the fire. I suggest that you do it reverently and mystically. I suggest that you do it. I'm not asking you to believe anything different about it. But we create the reality we inhabit by the attention that we give it. And so if you're tossing your paper in the fire thinking about what you're going to do when you get to the office on Monday, I don't think that spell is going to be powerful for you. So this is that moment we talked about earlier where I want you to go at least a little bit deeper than your comfort zone on this. You are in a safe space with the love of your neighbors and community around you. You are loved and supported. And this is a moment to decide what is not worth carrying into the time that's coming. And God gave Noah the rainbow sign. No more water. The fire next time. Now, this passage from an African American spiritual called Mary, Don't You Weep is the line with which James Baldwin opens his book, The Fire Next Time. It has been interpreted, as you can imagine, in many different ways, most of them apocalyptic. I would like to suggest to you this morning a different reading. 8 years ago, when we stood in a place similar to where we stand now, we felt like we were drowning. Many things have changed since then. as I've been preaching since November, we aren't the same as we were. And neither are our fellows. This time, it wasn't a minority. If you needed a bigger wake-up call, I don't know what it might look like. For these innocent people have no other hope. They are, in effect, still trapped in a history which they do not understand, and until they understand it, they cannot be released from it. We've said those who don't understand their history are destined to repeat it so many times it has become trite. So many times that we can say it without really taking the time to sit with it. We still want to just fix stuff and get on with stuff and put it behind us and move on. Not recognizing that we didn't set the baggage down, we shackled it to our ankles, and we wonder why we can't make progress. We got a whole baggage train, carrying it with us. This morning was a small invitation to unlock some of that. There is another line from that spiritual with which he closes his letter to his nephew. The very time I thought I was lost, my dungeon shook and my chains fell off. The very time I thought I was lost, my dungeon shook and my chains fell off. What does that mean? I think the main thing that it means is when he realized he didn't know, when he realized he didn't have all the answers, when he realized that the certainty was a falsity, he was, for the first time, truly free. You see, we human beings at this point in our evolution have tried to chain religion and make it something that can give us some false certainty. We have tried to chain science and make it something that can give us some false certainty. But at their best, both of these systems of approaching the world are tools for navigating the uncertainty that will certainly come. At their best, they are tools for navigating the uncertainty that will certainly come. So, we will, for the next many years, be digging deeper on many of the themes that I'm going to touch on today. Let me share another passage with you. I will, after today's service, send out a link to a YouTube video of the audiobook of this whole letter. I've listened to it probably 24 times in the last week. I think it's worth you listening to it at least once and see how it moves you. For those of you who don't know, and I should have written it more clearly in the introduction that Molly read, James Baldwin was a gay black man in the 1960s. A phenomenal poet and thinker and activist, a true prophet in my humble opinion. And he wrote This letter to his nephew, who was 15 years old in the year 1962, around the time of the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. And I quote, "It was intended that you should perish in the ghetto, perish by never being allowed to go behind the white man's definitions, by never being allowed to spell your proper name. You have, and many of us have, defeated this intention, and by a terrible law, a terrible paradox, those innocents who believe that your imprisonment made them safe are losing their grasp of reality. But these men are your brothers, your lost younger brothers. And if the word integration means anything, this is what it means: that we, with love, shall force our brothers to see themselves as they are, to cease fleeing from reality and to begin to change it. For this is your home, my friend. Do not be driven from it. Great people have done great things here and will again. And we can make America what America must become. It will be hard, James, but you come from sturdy peasant stock. People who picked cotton and dammed rivers and built railroads, and in the teeth of the most terrifying odds, achieved an unassailable and monumental dignity. You come from a long line of great poets, some of the greatest poets since Homer. One of them said, "The very time I thought I was lost, my dungeon shook and my chains fell off." You know and I know that the country is celebrating 100 years of freedom, 100 years too soon. We cannot be free until they are free. God bless you, James. And Godspeed, your Uncle James. It's not 100 years anymore, is it? 160 now. 160. And we have to acknowledge that the election that just happened with a public majority, the foundation of some of that was, oh, critical race theory. Oh, no. Racism can't be the poison that's poisoning the soul of America. It must be something else. Straight up denial. Straight up denial. Straight up denial of the truth of our own history is what is keeping us trapped here. I cannot make it any plainer for you. And I don't believe that this is an inappropriate all ages message. The fight was that kids were starting to learn the true history, a history that told everybody's stories, not just the winners' stories in Roman military terms. They were starting to learn these things, and they were coming home to their parents and saying, "Hey, what's up with this? Why am I hearing about this for the first time?" And the parents were like, oh, I don't want this to be true. You're suffering anxiety now. You mean the same anxiety that minority children have been living with for 160 years plus? That same anxiety? Yes, we're all experiencing it. All of us. We are not free from this. Ignoring is not freedom. Ignoring a true reality in which you live is not freedom. It is the shackles. It is the thing that's dragging the suitcase that you can't shake. One of the most profound things that he does in this short piece is his use of the word innocence. I don't know if any of you picked up on that in the two readings that we shared. A short quote. "Now, my dear namesake, These innocent and well-meaning people, your countrymen, have caused you to be born under conditions not very far removed from those described for us by Charles Dickens in the London of more than 100 years ago. Now that's interesting, because I think it suggests something that's true. Racism and race-based slavery wasn't the beginning of this. It was just another phase in its evolution. What does it mean to track back that history? That history of exploitation, that history of believing that certain people, based on their birthright, should be in control of other people. That certain people were entitled by lineage to eat off the fruits of the labor of others. That they were entitled to the fruits of other people's labor. That they were superior. That they held the mantle of power by divine right. Why are we talking about all this political stuff in church? Do you think, knowing what you know of the history of churches and religion, that they are free of politics? I can tell from the chuckling that you know better. When your excuse for genocide is that God wanted you to have this land, we are duly and deeply, welly entangled at that point. And divesting ourselves of such toxic myths is not only incumbent upon us as spiritual work, but it is incumbent upon us as political and social work as well. I do the work that I do because I think that it must be spirit first. I think that without doing our own spiritual work, we will recreate the same evils in a new guise. Because we will not have the spirit-centered vision to see what else is truly possible. We will not have the fortitude and the courage to face the darkness of what has been and what still is. There's another line in here. One can be, indeed one must strive to become tough and philosophical concerning destruction and death. For this is what most of mankind has been best at since we have heard of man. But remember, most of mankind is not all of mankind. But it is not permissible that the authors of devastation should also be innocent. It is the innocence which constitutes the crime. It is the innocence which constitutes the crime. What does that mean? Hiding under the self-righteous shell of stories of superiority, stories of entitlement, stories of divine will that place you on a different tier than your siblings, that blind you to the truth of our equality, create the sort of false innocence that Baldwin is talking about. When I was an atheist and attempting to be very clever with my words earlier in life, I developed a saying that ignorance might be bliss, but that doesn't make it desirable. But I think it's true, and it relates to what we're talking about this morning, which is ignorance, especially willful, mindful, forced, scaffolded, ignorance simply isn't excusable in mature people. The act of maturation itself is a move out of false belief and into clarity and the capacity to grapple with the unknown, giving up the need for identity and certainty that we need in the earlier parts of our life. So, back to this line. I circled around it and circled around it. God gave Noah the rainbow sign. No more water, the fire next time. The light of truth that burns all else away. The thing that remains when all you can see is cold ashes. In order to change the world, you need a lever and a place to stand. I wish I had a better metaphor, but I think love is both of those things. When we place love at the center, it becomes not only a place to stand, but the lever by which we move things. Maybe love is the stand, maybe courage is the lever. But I'm inviting you in these coming years not to drown in the water, but to burn away those things that are unworthy of your attention with the fire that is within you. The fire of your own consciousness and divine light and spirit, the fire of your passion, the fire of your love, the fire of your curiosity and your seeking for truth. The fire of those things can burn away the falseness and the darkness. They can burn away the need for false certainty. They can burn away the distraction of the trivial from the truth of what you are called here to do and to be. You, each of you in this room, individually, has a role to play in all of this. The powers that be would prefer that you sit on your couch, overwhelmed by the deluge and flood of opinions on MSNBC. I am not suggesting that you be unaware. What I am suggesting is that you learn where to place your attention and how valuable both you and your attention are to the world and to this process. Deeper down the anxiety rabbit hole, if I thought that was the answer, that's where I would try to lead you. If I thought that deeper down the anxiety rabbit hole was going to heal the problems that we have, I would march in there with you. And I would stand in the firestorm of that anxiety with you, and we would do that work together. How many people here feel like they make their best decisions when they're freaked out and stressed and anxious? I got one. It's all good. I got two. All right. Diversity comes in many flavors. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying that in my experience of human beings, it tends not to be the norm. And it's hard to find a place of stillness, a place to stand and a lever to move the world when you're rattled by anxiety. So if we do anything in this church, we want to find you a place to stand and a lever to push with that matters. One that matters. Not just contributing to the firestorm of noise, whose only aim is to deepen the anxiety pit itself. I'm not saying this is being done willfully. To use Baldwin's term, it is being done innocently. I'm inviting you out of your innocence. That is the work before us. Until next time, thank you for joining us on The Pulpiteer. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can help others find it by liking and subscribing. If you're so moved, you can even leave us a review. All reviews will be gratefully received. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can make a donation at sangabrieluu.org/give. The Pulpiteer Podcast is a production of the San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Georgetown, Texas. The podcast is hosted by Spotify, and theme music is by John Faber. Our live recording crew is Frank Sanders, Rob Berthold, Keith Hutchinson, and Andrea McDaniel. Special thanks to Molly Hornbuckle for her reading of the James Baldwin excerpt. The podcast is produced and performed by Eric Hepburn.